Central place theory is pretty much the theory behind finding the perfect location for a certain service or business. The origin of the theory came from Walter Christaller, who was a German economist, geographer. Made many of his observations in South Germany in his early 1900s, and he published his idea in 1933. The basic ideas and vocabulary behind the central place theory are the following. Number one is the central place function, which is what is that service being performed. I often think of if my career as a teacher goes south, I will be having a coffee shop. My central place function is the service of coffee that I would be providing for my customers. Central place is that market center for whatever the service is or the good. Okay, and then the hinterland is the area around the service from which customers are attracted. So if you live within 2 miles of my coffee shop and you are willing to walk or drive to my coffee shop to get a cup of coffee, you are in my hinterland. Another name for it is market area. If you are maybe 5 miles from my place, from my coffee shop, and you want a cup of coffee, but rather than coming to my coffee shop, you stop 3 miles short to go to McDonald's to get their McCoffee, whatever it is, you're in their market area, not my market area. So this central place theory helps identify the most profitable location for a certain service. In other words, if you want to open up a business, where will my new business make the most money and be successful? Okay, and this is something that's used by businesses all over the place. They will hire geographers and hire GIS specialists to run an analysis to find that number one best location for their business. And so here's kind of the startings of the idea. This dot in the middle is your market. Okay, this is your store. This is my coffee shop. The area around it theoretically would be my hinterland or the market area. And anybody who lives there is going to be attracted to my store. However, because there's other coffee shops or other communities, depending on how this is applied, if somebody lives here, it's shorter distance to go to this coffee shop or this community rather than driving all the way to my coffee shop. So they would be going to this other central place rather than my market. And so that's the basic idea of this area. However, if you just do this equal distance from the market area or the marketplace, this equal distance to create these circles, that leaves this area of like no man's land. Well, what if somebody lives here? What market would they go to? You know, what function or what central place are they attracted to? And so the theory changes circles and uses these hexagons instead. And so that way there's no space in between. And so if you live in this area, you are more likely to be attracted to this central place or to this business rather than the business here, if these are all the same businesses. Okay? So when does this work? Keeping in mind, it's a theory. All of these theories, all of the models in geography and many other things are just models to try to help explain the phenomena of maybe behavior or how things are distributed across the surface of a certain area. So this works with a featureless plane. So just like other models in the past, a featureless plane is saying that if there's no topography, no hills, no mountains, no rivers, no physical features that get in the way of your travel to that certain place that you'd be trying to, that's a featureless plane. That means everything is equal. There's no type of friction that would be getting in the way to prevent you or slowing you down from getting to a certain place. It's also based on the idea that there's an even population distribution. When you looked at those hexagons before, all those dots might be a different community, and it's the idea that they're all the same size community. and the market area or the hinterland around them has the same distribution of population. Okay. Also, it's taking the idea that all services demands are equal. In other words, it's assuming that somebody wants to go to maybe the grocery store just as much as they want to go to the bookstore or the library or the Bucks game. And so if they're all equal, then you have all of these perfect hexagons all over. But when you think of the size of the place, does that matter? You bet it does. Of course, when you have a larger city, they have a larger gravitational pull, and so when you look at the size of communities, the larger cities, there's fewer large cities on the map than there are small communities. There's fewer of them, and they're farther apart. Because being that larger size, they're going to be attracting people from further distances. Granted, or versus the smaller communities, their gravitational pull to attract people to those areas are going to be much smaller. Okay. So the smaller villages, there's much more or many more small villages throughout the state of Wisconsin than there are big cities, or throughout the United States than there are big cities. So there's more smaller villages or smaller communities, and they're a lot closer together. Okay. So when we talk about size, okay, we'll talk about settlement sizes. Here's the hierarchy, okay, the breakdown. The smallest that you have is what they refer to as a hamlet. You get a little bit larger and you have a village. A little bit larger and it's a town. Larger than a town, you have city. Larger than city, you have metropolis. Okay. And so you have this diagram here of central place theory showing that hierarchy. All of the green dots are villages, okay, and so their market area is just going to be a very small area around it, and because they're smaller than market towns or towns, there's more of them and they're closer together. Okay. However, you get a little bit larger, and you have the market towns, and so they're larger, they're farther apart, and they form this perfect hexagon, okay, that's going around here. And then when you go to the next size up, towns, there's fewer towns than there are market towns. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. If we were to expand this out, we would see that these would also be creating a hexagon as well. And then cities, in this case, there's only one. But again, if we were to zoom out and look at maybe the entire country, you would see more cities located in different areas. And it's just that there's fewer of them. So here's the idea. The larger the city, the larger the hinterland. For this town, they attract, their hinterland or market area is not just this area here, but they are pulling people in from a much larger area. If you notice the market towns, the borders between the market towns, these lines are really dividing the towns directly in half. And so that's what's creating the border for the market area or the hinterland of the town. Okay, the border for the market town is going to be this hexagon or pentagon that you can see here, and then the city is going to be having a market area that's this entire place, okay, or this entire area. So you can go through with each village, each market town, what is the hinterland for the market town? Okay, what is the hinterland for the town itself, and what is the hinterland for the city? So this point that divides one hinterland from another, these boundaries, these are referred to as the breaking point. Because if I lived right here, then more than likely I'm going to be traveling to this market or this coffee shop rather than this one. However, if I lived just on the other side, across this boundary, this imaginary boundary, well, I'm more likely to be attracted to this point. And so that's the breaking point of my decision of where I would travel. So it goes back to this gravity model that came up in chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, maybe not chapter 2, but chapter 3, the gravity model, the idea that the further you live away from a certain place, the less interaction there is. And so the less likely you are to travel that distance. Okay, so greater distance to a service, the number of people to travel to that service will decrease. If here's Montani's coffee shop, everybody who lives here wants to go to Montani's coffee shop. But the further and further you get, fewer people are going to make the trip to my coffee shop because of the greater distance. Okay, the threshold for a certain service is going to be the amount of people needed to support that service. It's estimated that for a full-service grocery store to start up, they need to have about 15,000 people living in that market area in order to support that grocery store. If you don't have 15,000 people there, you can build that grocery store, but they're not going to get enough customers to be successful, and so they're going to end up running out of money and then having to close down. And so every business has a threshold. The different thresholds for different businesses will vary based on that business. So why do some services have a larger market area? It's what they refer to as the order of goods. Low order would be things like bread, groceries, things that are found very often or very common. High order of goods are going to be things that you would go to for a certain store for a specific item, like computers. They're more unique than just bread is. Okay, and so those higher orders have what's referred to as a stronger gravitational pull. Just like if you think of planets in outer space, the larger the planet, it has a stronger gravitational pull pulling it towards itself. Likewise, certain services have a stronger or a larger gravitational pull, like computers or like professional sports teams. They are willing or able to pull people in from greater distances. People here in Mukwonago will go ahead and wake up, drive 2.5, 3 hours to go to a football game up in Green Bay, but they're not going to drive 3 hours up north to go to the grocery store, because we have a lot that are close by. And likewise, they're not going to drive 3 hours north to go see a minor league baseball team, because there's ones that are closer, and their performance is not going to be as good as a professional baseball team. So the range of a service function is going to be that distance that people are willing to travel. So we have this whole market area here. If this distance to the threshold or to the breaking point, let's say that's 5 miles, people are willing to travel 5 miles to get there. That is the range they're willing to travel to. Different services will have different ranges. Fast food restaurant, the average range one holds is 3 miles. Casual dining, a sit-down dining, the average range that people are willing to drive is 5 miles. A stadium event, that average range is 60 miles. Of course, that's going to be different, based on what kind of restaurant it is, or what kind of sports team it is. Again, Green Bay Packers, people will drive the 90 miles to Green Bay, which is beyond that traditional 60-mile range, but it's because it's the Packers, and we have that strong connection here in Wisconsin. In reality, what does Central Place look like? It does not look like these perfect geometric shapes. This would be the Central Place theory applied in Germany when the paper and the theory was published. Okay, and this is referred to as a market analysis, where they take all of these things into consideration. So the market analysis is the evaluation of range, threshold, service, order, etc., all of these factors to determine that perfect location. UW-Whitewater, a few years back, they used their geography students to do an analysis for the Qdoba restaurant to decide should they expand their free delivery an extra 5 miles or an extra 30 miles. So they identified where their stores were, where similar types of restaurants were, where competition was, and what kind of cities they would get. And their decision, if they expanded 5 miles, they would get downtown Janesville, which would be beneficial, and so they expanded their free delivery.